Why is it that at a time when right-wing parties are on the rise all over Europe, one of Germany's most free market, individual liberty-oriented parties just collapsed? The Free Democratic Party, once seen as Germany's premier defender of free markets and individual liberty, has been completely wiped out in the country's most recent election. For the first time in over a decade, the FDP lost all of their seats, and their support across the nation was cut in half at the polls, even as right-wing parties won the majority of the vote in Germany. So, how did this happen? You see, unlike the United States, Germany has multiple powerful political parties, meaning that it is seldom, if ever, that just one party wins enough seats to form a majority by itself. This means that coalitions among parties are necessary in order to form a government. And in 2021, the FDP decided that they were going to join the so-called traffic light coalition, forming a government with the center-left Social Democratic Party and the even more left Greens. Now, obviously, this is kind of an odd alliance for a libertarian-style party to belong to because the FDP campaigned on lowering taxes, deregulation, and fiscal responsibility. Meanwhile, their coalition partners did the exact opposite. They were pushing for massive spending increases, enormous tax hikes, and sweeping state intervention in the economy to include shutting down the country's nuclear plants. But the FDP thought maybe they could be something of a moderating influence on the process. So, how'd that work out? Well, instead of cutting spending, the government ballooned the budget. Instead of reducing regulation, they added more red tape. And instead of defending free markets, the FDP was complicit and signed off on policies that strangled businesses and made Germany more dependent on hostile foreign powers, to include Russia. The breaking point came over the issue of Germany's debt brake, a constitutional rule designed to prevent reckless government spending. The SPD and the Greens wanted to suspend it in order to fund even more state intervention into the economy. But this time, the FDP's finance minister refused to go along with it, and the coalition exploded. The FDP was pushed out, and an early election had to be called. Now, say what you want about the FDP joining this coalition in the first place. At least, when push came to shove, they stood on principle and blew up the coalition. So, of course, voters decided to reward them, right? No, because by the time voters went back to the polls, the entire country had abandoned them. And why wouldn't they? Because if you're the sort of voter that wants more progressivism or socialism, then of course you vote for the SPD or the Greens. But if you wanted more conservatism, why would you trust the FDP that had just spent years ignoring you while they pandered to voters who hated them? And ultimately, what happened in Germany to the FDP carries with it a valuable lesson for every libertarian, classically liberal, or conservative party in the world. You are not going to find your true allies or voters among socialists, progressives, or the far left. No matter how many compromises you make, they are always going to demand more. And when you've exhausted your usefulness, they're going to discard you. Because at the end of the day, you guys don't agree on how a country should be run. So, in short, the FDP didn't lose because their ideas were unpopular. They lost because they abandoned them for a seat at the table, which in the end only gave them a slightly better view to the destruction of their country's economy and their party's credibility. Now, they could have followed a different approach, one that's currently working under Javier Milei in Argentina and arguably under Trump in the United States of America. Namely, if you believe in your principles, then fight for them. Provide an argument, because even if you lose in a particular election cycle, you will at least have maintained your credibility and your integrity. And that is a firm foundation from which to build back in the future.